7. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Our friend and financial services guru turned photojournalist Chris Arnade recently took off on another trip around back row America, as he terms it, starting in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But his trip got cut short, as he recounts in a piece at Unheard, Why America Stopped Dreaming. And kind of interested to hear what he saw, why he cut his trip short, although I read the piece, so I have an idea.
But none of us know.
Yeah, and just sort of taking stock of where he thinks things are in America, talking to so many back row Americans over now quite a few years. If you haven't picked up his photojournalist retrospective from a couple of years ago, do so. It's called Dignity, Seeking Respect in Back Row America. Chris Arnade joins us now. Chris, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you felt compelled, was it just to get a sense of where people are at and things are at, 90 days before an election, or what put you back on the road starting in Scranton?
Yeah, exactly that. I decided I kind of spent 10 to 12 years just driving around America, walking around America, talking to people, getting a sense for where their heads were, how the nation was doing, what they believed the American dream was. And I took a 4-year break from that, and I thought I would go back and do it again ahead of the election.
So this is like a post-COVID. You were off the road during COVID?
That's correct. I kind of shifted my focus to the rest of the world. And haven't really been focusing too much on the U.S. And so with COVID, and that basically derailed a lot of plans.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided to try it again, and I failed. I ejected myself after about a week. It was a planned 3-week trip, and it was just too depressing. It was too depressing for me.
What were you hearing from people? Why was it so depressing?
A lot of what I've seen before is still there, which probably is the most depressing. When I wrote my book back in 2017, when I was doing my most of my articles, I felt like what I call the people in the front row, the elites, the political class, the academics, would kind of look at it and go, "Oh man, things are really messed up in this country. We need to fix things, or we need to at least stop blaming the American people, for our problems, and kind of look at ourselves and say maybe we need to think about how we run this country a little bit differently." And instead, they kind of buried their heads deeper into the sand, and just have ignored what's going on in their own country. And what's going on is a lot of addiction, a lot of depression, a lot of loneliness, a lot of pain, a lot of apathy, a lot of recklessness. And that's only been accelerated by COVID. The kind of the sense that we're not one nation, that we're a bunch of different isolated individuals who happen to share the same land, has only been accelerated by COVID, which has kind of tore us apart in many ways and accelerated a lot of bad trends that were taking place. This kind of, this kind of sense of it's all about me and it's not about us. And I think COVID really, the post-COVID landscape is very depressing. And in terms of politics, nobody really cares. I'm not a rude person. I'm not a journalist, and because I don't stick a microphone in people's face and ask them questions. I just kind of sit and talk and naturally have a conversation. And, if politics did come up, it was generally a sense of like, I really don't care who wins. I'm not going to vote. They're both awful.
Well, it's interesting. I go back to this when you to Eric Hoffer, often the longshoreman turned philosopher, and in his treatise on mass movements, he said basically there's a couple of things that need to be present for there to be a mass movement, like a paradigm shift in a society that is brought about by the masses, a mass movement. He said basically people need to believe that they're in control of their own destiny, and they need to believe things can improve. And if they don't believe one or both of those things, then they just sort of settle for the status quo because they are afraid things can get worse if they don't just sort of accept what they have at present. And it seems to me that's sort of what you're describing, which is really sad because that sort of fatalism just calcifies the way things are.
Yeah, there is a fatalism there, and you know, when I wrote my book, when I did my work back in 2015, 2016, I got kind of lampooned as explaining the Trump voter because I was one of the few journalists actually listening to people. What's much more common is I'm talking to non-voters, people who generally don't vote. And there is a fatalism, a sense of like, you know, and that fatalism, that was there in 2015, 2016. And I think Trump offered a certain segment of the population some hope, you know, this kind of refreshing change. And I think that's less the case now. I think 8 years later, there's a sense of kind of, well, we've seen this act before. If you talk to people who are aligned to Trump, it's, you know, along the lines of they're not going to let him get him back in power again. All the forces are aligned against him. And if you talk to people who are generally against him, it's that he's had his chance and he fell. So it doesn't have the energy it had. The Trump movement doesn't have the energy, at least from what I saw, that it had in 2016, 2015, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. You write in your piece you went from Scranton to Bristol, Tennessee. I got a buddy from Chicago who just moved to Bristol, Tennessee. Now I'm a little concerned for him after hearing your description of what you were observing. I think he's actually sort of in a nice rural part of it where he can fish and play with his dog, which is what he wanted. But I mean, just what I guess instilled a certain sort of fatalism in you that you cut the trip short.
A lot of it was this, I've seen this before and it's not gotten better. You know, it's like you watch a movie once, and you watch it the second time and you don't like the ending. You're like, why am I putting myself through this again? So there was that, I know I'm going to sound like an arrogant elitist here, but also there's a lot of ugliness in the United States that I kind of, just the way we build things, the lack of, you know, it's like we build these shopping malls that look the same no matter where you are. I was sitting in a shopping mall somewhere in Chattanooga, one of these strip malls, and I'm like, I could be anywhere. I could be in upstate New York where I live. I could be in West Maryland. I can be in Florida. I can be in Texas. It's like we take this concrete prefab built building and we just bulldoze it in and we plop it down, and we don't put any shade on it. So I started noticing that America is immensely beautiful in terms of natural resources. It's you know, if you spend a lot of time around the rest of the world, you're like, oh my, you know, the U.S. has so much natural beauty that any country would love to have, but we put such ugly buildings in it. We just put these really prefab, cheap buildings that were made by companies that just want to maximize profit, and that's all they care about. So they build the cheapest thing they can build. And so that started to impact me, that sense of this is not a pretty country, at least what we're building in here. And then you see what people eat. And I'm very careful about casting judgment on somebody else's behavior, but, you know, a Kit Kat cappuccino and three donuts at 6 a.m, man, that's more calories than I eat in a day.
Yeah.
So it started to feel very, and I don't like to hate. I don't like to be that person. And so there was a bit, I kind of had to self-eject because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be someone casting judgment on others that way. So I'm like, you know, I'm getting tired of this.
Well, these pictures are beautiful that you took. I mean, they say so much, but I loved your conversation with Caroline, who was sitting alone in a McDonald's. Can you tell us more about her? And do you talk to these people after you interview them? Do you exchange numbers, or is it just one and
Yeah,
done.
I mean, I tried to I try to give them some degree of privacy, but if they want a little bit less privacy, I open up and talk a little bit more to. Yeah, I talked to her. She was there at 6 a.m. waiting for an interview. She was living in a homeless shelter, and she had been in a homeless shelter because she was escaping an abusive relationship. And that sort of endurance is why I kind of ended after I met her because I wanted to end on a positive note to remind myself that you can be angry at where our country is going, but you shouldn't get angry at the people themselves because the people are good. They have an amazing capacity to endure and to find goodness, even if there's not a lot of goodness around them. And so she believed in the American dream. She was one of the few. She came from her mother was an addict. Her father was long gone, and so she had been around a lot of abuse and a lot of addiction, and she herself wasn't that. She was not. She doesn't use drugs. She had been in a bad relationship, and she was really apologetic about her speech because she's having trouble speaking because she had a new set of dentures because her boyfriend had taken the others out with his fists. Mm. So that was, to me, the most positive part of the trip was to meet someone like her who, despite all she's been through, still has a positive, optimistic outlook, which I think ultimately is what I want. That's the image I want to have of America, is that kind of ability to endure, to hope for something better, despite a lot of problems.
It's just interesting. Just to go back to the Kit Kat cappuccino and 3 donuts. RFK RFK Jr. has made an issue of this, and some other people too have done so as well. I just wonder. I mean, maybe that's sort of a below the fold issue, and I'm not saying I completely subscribe to RFK's full analysis of the American diet and why it's this way, and the incidence of disease and so forth associated with it. But there definitely is something to the incidence of obesity and other maladies that have at least some connection to diet, and maybe that is something that that deserves more of an airing, more of a deeper dive, and to prompt a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I 10 years ago, I didn't necessarily care what people ate, but now I think it does impact. It impacts your health. It impacts how you see the world. There's a lot of value to being physically healthy, and you kind of see that movement, kind of the gym bro movement.
Yeah,
or kind of like born again people in the sense that they have to go full. They have to go full on. No carbs, no sugars, no alcohol, to kind of insulate themselves against the prevailing culture, which is kind of a sense of like eat whatever you want, whenever you want. I do think, it's very hard to eat healthy in places, lots of America. There's just not a lot of options. Yes, you can go to certain grocery stores and you can shop very strategically, but what you're being bombarded with, the amount of kind of easy calories are just there. And I do think, when I kind of like, someone said to me, like, why are you shaming people? And I said, maybe we need a little bit more shame in our society.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing, right? Isn't that, your kids get shamed by their parents when they do something wrong, and it sticks with you. That's sort of the point, isn't it? I mean, not to treat adults like children, but the point is that that's a powerful tool when it comes to behavior modification. And oh, by the way, maybe part of the problem in America is this idea you do whatever you want, whenever you want, regardless of the consequences, because nothing is right or wrong. It's just living my truth, and that sort of libertinism that, or even nihilism that has that is more pronounced, I think, in our culture than it used to be.
Yeah, there is a kind of postmodern nihilism that you do whatever you want, what makes you feel good. But we are, our healthcare system and our government is one in which we are partially socialist, and so if somebody eats very badly and I have to pay for their coronary at the age of 45, which I ultimately do at some level, that we're in it together in some senses, whether we want to be or not. And so, I do. The other thing is just at a more empathetic level. You feel a lot better if you are eating healthy.
Yeah.
And that changes how you behave. That changes how you think. That changes how you approach everything.
Have your journeys over the last decade or so, have they changed your politics or perspective in any way? Faith, I don't know if you're a person of a particular faith tradition, but faith or politics or any way that you sort of see and understand America?
Yeah, I mean, I've become much more religious. I've become come back to the Catholic Church. I now I go to Mass wherever I am, no matter what country I'm in. I've been to Mass in Muslim countries because I think, going back to kind of that sense of where you need something in your life that's bigger than you, and if you just focus only on you and you think whatever you do has no impact, that's a very meaningless, empty way to live. There is a much bigger part to being alive than just eating as much sugar as you want and partying as much as you want. There's much more to life than that, and so I have become much more religious. And in that process, I would say I probably shifted right politically, although I do find myself kind of in no man's land where I kind of more empathize with people who don't vote because I just don't feel. I feel like the problems are beyond politics. They're cultural. They're kind of how we live, how we see the world, how we approach the world. And so, in that sense, I'm kind of more of a, I guess, fit into what they call the post-liberalism camp of people like, who generally are Catholic intellectuals.
Chris Arnade is a writer and photojournalist. Currently he did take a sort of a walk around the world, and then he was doing another trip, as we were discussing. You can check out his piece, Why America Stopped Dreaming, at unheard.com, and pick up his book, Dignity, Seeking Respect in Back Row America. Chris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Can you read this email for me?
Of course. Jeez, I wish they could do something for your eyesight.
Ugh, me too. But you heard what they said. There's nothing we can do.
When vision loss can't be corrected with glasses or surgery and hope seems lost, turn to Spectrios Institute for Low Vision. Spectrios doctors specialize in the treatment of vision loss related to eye diseases such as macular degeneration, glaucoma, and diabetic retinopathy. There is hope, supported by science with personalized rehabilitation plans, occupational therapies, and access technology at Spectrios. Talk to a patient service manager. They'll walk you through the program. Spectrios takes BCBS and Medicare insurance. They also have grants for qualifying patients and offer a Seeing is Believing children's outreach program. Go to spectrios.org, located in Wheaton in a building that says it all, the House of Hope. That's spectrios.org. Spectrios Institute, the head, heart, and eyes approach to better vision. Remember to keep Spectrios